So let's end 2023 with 23 book recommendations out of the books that I read in 2023. I have quite a variety of books to go over with you today. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to give you 23 book recommendations out of the 120 plus books that I have read so far this year. I hope that you like the mix of genres that I put in here. Of course, the majority of them are going to be fantasy romance and dark romance type of genres, but I do have a little bit of something for everybody. So I hope that you enjoy it. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this video. Definitely make sure you check my description box below that has all of my links down there. So let's get into all of the 23 book recommendations. So I do not have these in order of genre. I don't have them in order of my most favorite read. I don't have any of that. I just kind of went through the books that I have read this year, jotted down the books that really stuck out to me that I would like to recommend to you. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with some of the books that I don't own physically, and then that way I can just get to this stack of books that is right next to me. So the first book that I want to go over, I have a list here. And I needed to make a list because 23 books to remember off the top of your head is not easy. So the first one is Whispers of You by Catherine Cowles. This is a contemporary romance. It is the first book in a series. However, I think that the books in this series are like interconnected. They're not following the same characters, but a group of characters set in this town. So it is a small town romance. There is kind of a little bit of a mystery vibe to it. There is talks of trauma and some PTSD, so definitely check trigger warnings. But I definitely want to recommend this to my contemporary romance girlies because this book was really good. I remember rating it a 4-star because it wasn't a full 5-star read for me, but that's because I don't really read very many contemporary romances, and that's just on me. It has nothing to do with the writer or the book itself. So if you like contemporary romance, definitely try Whispers of You. The next one that I want to recommend is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is like a thriller / domestic suspense type of book, and it was really, really good. And of course, I don't really read thrillers, but Lisa Jewell always hits home for me when I do pick up one of her books. I've only read 2 so far, but None of This Is True really takes you on kind of a wild journey where you are following these 2 girls who are turning 45 on the same day. They have the same birthday and everything. One of them is a successful podcaster. The other one is more like a stay-at-home wife / mom. And they end up crossing paths very early on in the book at a local pub. And their friendship kind of starts from there. And as you go through this story, you are being told from one person's perspective and then another person's perspective. And at some point, you're just like, what is even real? What is not real? And it was so good. So if you like thrillers and kind of little mind game type of books, definitely pick up None of This Is True. It's really, really good. The next one that I have on my list is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. It is a YA sci-fi book, and this is following our main girl, Spensa, where Spensa's dad was in the most recent war against like the aliens type of thing, and they're on this planet where they live underground. And he was dubbed a coward. And so everybody looks down on Spensa and her family. She wants to make a name for herself. So she ends up doing what she can to take away the whole coward part of her family that has been lingering over them, and you go on a wild ride with her. So if you do like science fiction books and you like them more on the YA side, definitely pick this up. I think Brandon Sanderson did a very good job whenever he wrote this, because I know he's well known for his fantasy, but his sci-fi books are pretty good. So then the next one is going to be Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. This is a literary fiction book. I did not know that whenever I started reading it, but it really took me by surprise this year. I read it back in July, and you are following Adelaide, and she has had not such a great life, and you're following her on this like romance where this guy is kind of like abusive and controlling, and you're watching how she grows and stuff. So I would highly suggest trigger warnings as well to check on those, because I feel like it hit a lot of hard-hitting topics, and I feel like it threw me kind of a curveball, so I think that everybody needs to check it. But it was really good. If you like literary fiction, if you like books where you do go on an emotional ride, I highly suggest picking up Adelaide. It was actually really good. And then the last two books that are on here before I get to my stack is the Air Awakens series, but I'm only going to put book 1 here. It is a YA fantasy romance, and I read the whole series at the beginning of October, and boy, does Elise Kova really like put you in the ringer. You are following our main girl, which she is the last of the airbenders, and she basically kind of comes to the aid of other people in the town, even though people are not nice to her. It's good, you guys. Like, there is a war going on. She is someone that can save them. It was just really, really good. And I feel like the writing kind of got a little bit dull towards the middle of the series, but the series in a whole still is leaving a lasting impression to me. And the husband just brought me some coffee, and I definitely need it today. So let's get on to the last book that I don't own physically, and we will move on from there. And it is a thriller, and it's a most recent thriller that I read back in October, and it's called The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin, I believe is the author. Anyway, this book is, like I said, a thriller, but it's kind of like a mystery horror type of book as well, because you're following our main girl who buys Blackwood house they live in Australia, and this house has kind of a very horror-esque past where there was some gruesome murders that happened, and basically no one has lived there. And so she moves in there, she's blogging about it, she's a successful marriage counselor, and things start happening in her marriage, things start happening to her and people around her, and it gets kind of that mystery vibe. But as you're following her, you realize that maybe her mind is not fully there. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't read thrillers, but this one really hit home as well. And I don't read horror either, and it kind of scared me a little bit, where if you watched any of my videos back at the beginning of October, you would have heard me talk about how I would grab my husband and ask him to just sit in the room with me while I finished the book, because I get scared very easily, so anything that is like horror, I tend to stay away from. But there are some books that I have read that have some horror elements to it, and I don't mind it, but this one really just kind of triggered me. So let's get into some of the physical books that I have here, because I don't want this to be a super long video, but I also want you guys to hopefully get some good recommendations out of this as well. Okay, so first up, let's go over some of the manga and graphic novels that I have read this year that I do suggest for you. I only have 3 of them, so if you do like manga and graphic novels, maybe you might want to pick one of these up. The first one is Game Between the Suits. This is a very spicy manga. So make sure that you are very aware of that. And basically you're following the main girl who kind of is a workaholic. People always refer to her as acting like a man because she puts her work first. She doesn't think about herself or her personal life. And in walks our main guy, and he is a new intern at this place. They come up with this new game where they kind of just relieve steam with each other, if you know what I mean. And they have said that if either one of them finds love, then the game is over. And so it gets spicy, it gets really good, the banter and everything, just impeccable. So if you like manga and you want a little bit of a spicier manga, definitely pick up Game Between the Suits. Then the next one is not a spicy manga, but still very good nonetheless, and that is My Happy Marriage. And this book is following our main girl who is basically in an arranged marriage. She thinks that her soon-to-be husband is going to be cruel and mean to her, so she's not looking forward to marrying him. And she ends up marrying him, and as they get to know each other and the friendship starts blossoming, and then of course the friendship that blossoms turns into love, and it's really, really good. I loved this. I loved how amazing it was and how it shows that even though you get into an arranged marriage, you always hear like people talk in history how it was a loveless marriage. It shows something where you can actually learn to love somebody, not even just based on lust, right? Like, but true love. So I really love this manga series as well. And then finally, the last one is a graphic novel, and that is Saga. And if you like sci-fi, fantasy type of books, definitely pick this up. It is told from the future point of view of the baby. And her mom and dad come from a planet and a moon that orbits that planet, and they're warring between each other. So it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet in a way. And you're following them along this way, and you're hearing it from her future point of view, like her looking back and telling you about her life, her family, what they went through. And it's really good. I would tell you that the graphics in here is beautiful, but definitely know going into this that it is very adult. So you're going to have very gruesome scenes. You're going to have some spicy scenes. You're going to have scenes that maybe you don't necessarily like. So just remember that whenever reading the graphic novel, because it's a lot different than reading just words on page. You're actually seeing it happen. All right, so let's get into the physical books that I have sitting right next to me. So the first one is going to be Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. If you are looking for a YA dystopian fantasy romance and you don't want to dive into the adult fantasies yet, you're just wanting to dip your toes into things, I do suggest Red Queen because it is very easy to follow. It has a lot of the cliche tropes that you will find in a lot of YA fantasy romances, but it's in a dystopian world. So I loved this. I loved the fact that it was just so easy to get into, so easy to read. Whenever you're following our main girl, things happen. She ends up having to go live at the castle, and she is definitely considered a lower part of society. However, come to find out, our girl has magic, and she's not supposed to have magic because she's a red blood. So things get a little crazy for her. She is friends with the prince. There's some betrayal that goes on. I'm just telling you, this is a very classic book that has been going around for years. So if you're wanting to dip your toes into a little bit of fantasy romance, I would suggest, maybe picking this up. Start on the YA side. The next one I'm going to tell you about is on the opposite end of the spectrum, and that is Fairy Tale by Veronica Lancet. This is very adult, so make sure that you're not going into this thinking that it's YA or new adult. There is spicy scenes, there is gothic horror in here. There is also some trigger warnings that I would suggest you checking. Actually, check trigger warnings for all of these because there's some books that I may forget to tell you to check trigger warnings, and sometimes I like myself some dark books, and it's always a good thing to check. But Fairy Tale is really good if you want a unique fantasy romance that has a little bit of a reincarnation story, and it's like kind of back in the 50s, so it's not modern times, but it's not like ancient times either. It was really, really good. And what I really loved about it is how the story starts out. She ends up going to Fairytale for a reason, which I'm not going to tell you why. And things just start happening. She's wondering if she's losing her mind. It kind of gives you a little bit of a thriller aspect. And then things just take off. And it's a standalone, so you're not going to have to worry about starting a whole new series. But I do suggest checking out Fairytale. And then, of course, I had to put this on the list. A lot of these I had to put on the list. And you're probably going to see a lot of these in a upcoming video. So definitely check that out. That's why I'm not going very much in depth with a lot of these books. But I also recommend Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Whether you've read Caraval or not, this series is very easy to get into. You are following Evangeline and Jax as they go through this story, through this mystery, trying to solve things. They're ripped apart and put back together, and it was just absolutely beautiful, very whimsical, and very fairy tale. I absolutely loved that. However, if I was to suggest something, please try Caraval first, because even though in the first book it's just kind of setting up what Caraval is and the characters, Jax doesn't come into play until the second book in the Caraval trilogy. And even though you really don't have to read it, I preferred to read Caraval first because it introduced me to Jax and the world and Stephanie Garber's writing. And even though I didn't love Caraval, I did trudge through it, and then whenever I got to this one, like, there's a lot of Easter eggs that you will read, especially in this first book. It is set in the same world, in the same timeline, and so you would miss out on a lot of those, little hidden moments if you hadn't read. But Once Upon a Broken Heart is so good. I know that the third book just came out in October, which is A Curse for True Love, and it's a completed trilogy, so you don't have to wait for the next book to come out. So let's move on to one of my new favorite reads of the year, which I keep telling you guys that this is a sleeper book. No one is talking about it, and you definitely need to. And that is Of Shadow and Moonlight by Luna Laurier. I'm not going to go into what this book is about because I have probably talked your ear off about this for far too long now. But if you want a YA gothic fantasy romance, and you want one that probably doesn't have like the most immaculate writing, but has a very addicting story, has a very unique story, has paranormal elements to it, has, the main guy who is just like the new book boyfriend type of thing, I suggest picking this up. It was so good. I couldn't stop reading it. I was just devoured by this world and these characters, which let me overlook how the writing is, because the writing isn't terrible, but you can definitely tell that she is not as experienced as a lot of other authors out there. Nonetheless, even with that, this story is very addicting, so definitely check that out. Then let's get into another recent read that I had, which I am going to be filming my weekly wrap-up after this, so you're probably going to hear more thoughts on that before this video comes out. But that is Blackbird of the Gallows by Meg Castle. So this book, I had no idea that, for one, Entangled Publishing had printed this book, because I'm an Entangled insider and I'm part of their secret Facebook group. I don't know how you would say that, but I can get ARCs. I can request ARCs, of books that are coming out before they go up on NetGalley and such. But I didn't know this was an Entangled Publishing book. Granted, it came out back in 2017, so I wasn't an insider at that moment. I literally picked this book up strictly off cover vibes out of Books A Million's bargain bin, and it Oh my gosh, you guys, it is amazing. It was just like the previous book I just talked about. It sucked me in. The story was very addicting. The writing is also really good in here. It just takes off, and I loved it. I don't know what is up with me, but even though it's a fantasy romance, it's like a paranormal, gothic fantasy romance. Maybe that's what I like. Maybe that just little niche genre is what I like, because every time I talk about it, it's always a gothic, paranormal, fantasy romance is what it is. So maybe that's what I like the most. But if you like any of those, pick this up. Hopefully you watched my video of my weekly wrap up that went out the past Saturday, since this is going up on Tuesday, and you heard more of my thoughts on this because it was so good. And then, of course, another read that I just couldn't get enough of, and it's a new author for me, at least, not a new author out there in the world, but that is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. So I loved this book. I loved everything about this book. It is a friends to strangers, because they're not really enemies, friends to strangers to lovers, and you are following two of our characters, and you see them whenever they are like 13 and 14 years old, and you're watching them grow up, and then you're watching them flash forward to whenever they're like 29 and 30. They run across each other's paths again. Now they both have to confront those feelings that they had back then as adults, and things are so good. It is not spicy, which, you know, you don't have to have spice in everything, right? I loved this. It was so heartwarming. The story was so good. The writing was amazing. I loved Macy. I loved Elliot. I loved everything about this book. And so I'm craving more Christina Lauren books. So I've been asking, give me suggestions that would be something similar to this that I would love by Christina Lauren. Leave me comments below, please. And then the next book that I want to recommend is an author that I absolutely love. I found her whenever I read her Rowan Wood Legends series, which isn't talked about much, which is crazy. And I read that last year or the year before. First book is called Rose Petal Graves. It's like a fae fantasy romance with like Native American representation in there, and I absolutely loved it. But her new series, House of Beating Wings by Olivia Wildenstein, does not disappoint again. It was so good. It is a fantasy romance, but it was very different than what I thought it would be. And it was, you know, really good. You're putting these crows back together, and you find out why you're putting these crows back together. And our girl thinks that if she frees all 5 iron crows, she is going to marry the king or prince of this, you know, land. And so she takes it as her crush, who she grew up with, her best friend, the prince. She thinks that she's going to marry him. So she's like on this quest. Things take a turn. You find out things aren't exactly what they seem. So good. If you like a fae fantasy romance, definitely pick this up. It will grip you. It is addicting. Again, you won't be able to put it down. There is a theme here in all of these books. They're just so addicting, and I can't stop thinking about any of these books. So, House of Beating Wings by Olivia Wildenstein. I do think 3 books are out, and there's supposed to be 4 total, I think. So, I think the 4th one's coming out soon, so you wouldn't have to wait too long if you wanted to read it. Then the next one, again, you guys have heard me talk about numerous times on this channel, but that is Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. I, again, bought this from Barnes & Noble strictly just off of the cover. Had no idea what it was about. It's a fae fantasy romance. It is a reverse harem, a why choose. It also is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. All of those I found whenever I was reading the book, and I was like, you know, no wonder why I love this book, because Beauty and the Beast I love. I do enjoy reverse harems from time to time. So definitely check this out if you want a different fae fantasy romance and a different take on the Beauty and the Beast retelling, because there is a curse they have to break, of course. And, you know, there are the dad went to sacrifice himself, but of course she sacrifices herself to get her dad freed. It's good, you guys. It is so good. I think book 3, and I think it's the final book, just released this month. So, again, you don't have to wait very long to finish this series. So we are down to the last few, you guys, and I'm wondering if these last few are the ones that I am like never done talking about, because I can definitely see that they are on like my tops of this year, which you're going to see again in a future video. But let's just kind of dive right into it. First, we have Losers by Harley LaRue. This series, oh my gosh, starts with the novella The Dare, which is like 130 pages. And it introduces you to Manson Reed. It introduces you to our main girl. It introduces you to a whole world of kink that you never knew existed. Maybe you did. Who knows? Definitely check the trigger warnings and the full kink list, because there is quite a lot. It turns into a duology, which is Losers Part 1 and Part 2, which does turn into a reverse harem, which does bring out more kinks. It's very dark. It's so good. I love it. I can't wait to finish Part 2, which I'm probably going to get to at the beginning of next year. I just found out that there was a book box, like Dark and Disturbed, that just came out with a special edition of all 3 of the books, like Losers Part 1 and 2 and the novella, The Dare, and I think it was in their December box. I'm desperately in search for it, so hopefully I can find it for somewhat of a reasonable price. And then the next one is Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I had read this earlier this year, right before Ashes and the Star-Cursed King came out, and it was like a TikTok sensation, and it was all over BookTube. So whenever I read it, I was like, who is Carissa Broadbent, and how has she stolen my life? Because now I'm consumed by her books. I literally was consumed. This series is following our female main character, who her family is killed early on whenever in her life, and she is taken by Vincent, who is the Nightborn King. And he like kind of raises her as his daughter, trains her to live in this world of vampires who are vicious and bloodthirsty. And every 100 years, a tournament type of thing comes up where you can like shed your blood and, you know, mark yourself that you want to be a part of the tournament. And she's immortal with all of these vampires, and she is wanting to enter this tournament because she wants to win to gain the goddess's favor, because she wants to link herself to her father Vincent, where they can share power, not in a romantic way, in just a strict family dynamic where she wants to keep him safe, he wants to keep her safe. So she enters this tournament, things happen, she meets a guy named Rain. That's all I'm going to say. This book is good. So good. It is a fantasy romance with a lot of action in it. And action, I mean like fighting and, you know, she's on the edge of dying type of thing. So it's you're going to be sitting on the edge of your seat with this one. We're down to the last 4 books, you guys. So the next one up, I'm sure everyone's been hearing about it, which is Divine Arrivals by Rebecca Ross. I'm not going to go too much into it because the whole BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram community has been just enthralled with this, and it is kind of like a World War II-esque type of story. It gives you those vibes in that setting, but there's a romance in it, and there is some fantasy elements with some gods fighting each other. But our female main character has a rival at the newspaper that she works at, and then she has a magical typewriter that she thinks that she's writing to her brother, and she's not. So good. This is the Owl Crate version. I think it's the prettiest out of all of them. But Divine Rivals is so good. I definitely want everyone to think about, if you like a wartime romance, pick this up, because there's not a whole lot of fantasy in the first book. Now, the second book comes out later this month. I don't know if there's a lot of fantasy in that, but I have seen a lot of booktubers say this reads like a wartime romance, and I agree with that. And then the next one, I'm not going to go over it very much because I talk about this book all of the time, and that is Blood Mercy by Vila Roth. If you are wanting a fantasy romance that is very political, very dense on the writing and proper writing style, you want a very, very, very slow story, pick up Blood Mercy, which is the Blood Grace series. I loved it. I am still currently reading it. I am just enthralled with this whole world, and I'm devouring it. And whenever the Hesperines, which are like vampiric creatures, they are portrayed as like marshmallows. They want peace. They don't kill, like, I was so intrigued. I love this series. So pick up Blood Mercy if you want to kind of see if you like a dense political fantasy romance. You will be surprised. Please understand me whenever I say that, because never in a million years would I have thought that I liked a very slow progressing, dense political romance. I never thought that I would, and I do. I'm eating it up. So, like I said, give it a try. So second to last recommendation is a romantic comedy, and that is X's and O's by Amy Lee. This book, I had no idea what it was. It came in an Afterlight subscription before I canceled it, and I decided to give it a try, thinking that I'm not going to really like it because it's a rom-com. I was wrong. You are following like a booktuber, a book influencer, type of thing, and she ends up swapping apartments with her sister's fiance, moving in with a guy named Trevor, who is like, I think he's a firefighter if I remember correctly, and they become friends and then to lovers, and it was so good. I was laughing out loud, crying because I was giggling so much. This book was so good. It was such a fast read. So if you like rom-coms, definitely pick this up. Hands down, really, really good. And then the last book that I'm going to go over is, it's fighting and contending to be my favorite book of 2023. And I didn't even realize I left this one for last. And I did not intend to do that. But that is The Words by A. Jade. This is a standalone contemporary romance where you are following Phoenix and Lennon. And Phoenix is a rock star. He has made it big. Things have happened, and he's thrusted back with Lennon being in his life, where Lennon, she was betrayed by Phoenix in high school, and it's been 5 years, and betrayed in a big way, according to Lennon. And so now she wants revenge, so she has decided to team up with Phoenix's PR team, where she's going to keep him clean from drugs and alcohol to get him through the tour that has like 6 weeks left. So she is like just always around Phoenix, and the banter is great. You can definitely tell that the angst is there, and I just ate it up. I love it so, so much. I can't recommend this enough. There is a spin-off duology called The Choice, and then I think the second book comes out beginning of next year called The Consequence, and it is a duology about two characters that are in The Words, and I'm not going to say who they are because it would give that away, but it is in The Words, and you meet them, and they are kind of a big deal in this book, and I'm very happy that we get their backstory and how they know each other, and kind of their will they, won't they romance. And so I was very happy for that. I'm desperate for The Consequence to come out. I know that A. Jade was supposed to release it this year. She decided to push it back because she wanted to take a little bit more time to make it better. Hands down, girl, you go. I will wait until you think it is perfect, because this world, these characters, I love it so much. So if you like contemporary romance and you like a rock star romance, here you go. The Words by A. Jade. So those are 23 book recommendations for 2023 of the books that I have currently read as of today. And I really don't see any outstanding books that I'm going to be reading towards the end of the year, or at least maybe I hope so, but it's starting to be Christmas and I'm not going to be reading as much. But leave me some comments below. Are any of these on your list of books that you want to read or that you have read? I definitely want to hear your thoughts, and I hope everyone has a great Christmas, and I will see you next time. Bye!